Hey y'all, it's Chris here with Rockin Farm, and I think it's about time that I finally talk about my wife's chickens. So the name of the game here is hopefully going to be like small scale hatchery. We're not talking Murray McMurray here. We're not even necessarily talking about something like a Green Fire Farm or, some big importer. That's not the goal. If it gets that big someday, great. But with our limited space, limited infrastructure, etc., we would be very, very happy to have, 8 to 10 breeds of birds. And the main breed that we have both fallen in love with, especially my wife, although I think I kind of introduced them to her, I'm not sure, but we really, really like English Orpington chickens. And there are several different color patterns of English Orpington chickens, each one that is classified as its own breed because of the various genetics that have to go into it to create the color pattern. If you haven't figured it out already, this is going to be a very crowy video because I'm showing y'all the chickens, so we're going to deal with a lot of roosters this morning. Now, we are definitely in the building phases of our poultry breeding operation, and the building phases are incredibly tough. My wife and I are having to take on roles that neither one of us really would prefer that we be the one that takes those roles on, but it's just what we have to do for now. So we have a lot of frustrations. I'm constantly telling my wife, please stop brooding birds, please stop hatching birds, please stop incubating birds, please stop buying birds. And the reason that I'm begging so much is because we just don't have the infrastructure in place in order to house all the birds, grow out all the birds, etc. But we can't have that infrastructure in place if we don't have money, and we can't have money if we're not selling birds. So we run into these spots where we're kind of overwhelmed with birds during certain months of the year, and then those more popular months for purchasing birds come back, and we sell a ton of birds, and we get a little more money, and we put in a little more infrastructure, and we're in a little bit better place. The building phases of any business are always a really, really tough spot to be in. So like I said, right now we end up with, a barn that sometimes is stinkier than I wish it was because I just can't keep up with keeping it cleaned out because there's so many birds in there. And then we get to a phase like right now where I have lots of open space for birds, not enough birds to fill them, and not enough birds to sell. And the wife looks at me at this point and goes, see, I told you we should have got more birds. And she's right, but where do I put them? So the building phase right here is really, really tough. Eventually, the breeding pens like you see behind me, an independent coop and an independent yard for these breeding flocks. Eventually, I want to have about 10 of these because then each one of these will be an area for the 10 different color patterns or breeds of English Orpington that we have. And then we can do things like use these chicken tractors as areas where we can grow out birds for sale. And we can use the barn over there as an area where we can grow out young chicks that are too small for the chicken tractors. And then the last piece of infrastructure that we're hoping to get our hands on is some sort of a shed that it's big enough to house chicks, several brooding areas of chicks, but small enough that we can really insulate it well and climate control it with both heat and air conditioning, and then also small enough that we can really plug up all the gaps and make it really, really tight to keep things like snakes and mice out of it. If I can get these runs built, I have 4 of these runs right now. 2 of them are not for, they're never going to be for breeding. There are dude coops. It's where we keep our backup roosters and our grow out roosters. I'm going to show you everything in a second. And so really I only have 2 of these. Right behind me here, you see our silver-laced English Orpingtons, and then kind of back here behind me, you see our English Buff Orpingtons. Those are the only 2 breeds right now that I have in these runs. Our Lemon Cuckoo English Orpingtons are still in a tractor. Our Diamond Jubilee English Orpingtons are still in a tractor. Some of our other breeds are still very young. They're juveniles, so they're combined in tractors or they are in their own independent cages in the barn. So I've got a lot of building to do, y'all. I mean, I need to make another 8 of these probably, and I need to probably make a couple of more chicken tractors that we can move around the yard for the grow out birds. And then we need to try and get our hands on that shed. Once all of that infrastructure is in place, then the business model really starts to click. But that takes a lot of money. The way we're doing that right now is my wife is having to work a ridiculous amount of overtime at her job, which leaves her very, very little time to actually participate in the goings on of the chickens. So even though the chickens are really kind of her thing and her aspect of the business, the pigs are kind of more my thing. We do take an interest in one another's interests. I like the chickens too. She likes the pigs too. So it's not like it's totally her thing and totally my thing. But for right now, she's doing as much of the selling of our chicken stock as she can. And I'm pretty much wholeheartedly responsible for building all of the infrastructure, some of the selling, all of the feeding, and she's in charge of just working stupid hours at her job so that we can have the money to build out this infrastructure. Once the infrastructure is in place, the additional income isn't really as necessary. So at that point, she can take a step back from working so many hours at work and have more time to do more stuff with the chickens. That's kind of the goal. And then once we get it to where the entire, the chickens are completely paying for themselves, the pigs are completely paying for themselves, then at that point, we may even be able to talk about her stepping out of her current position at her job into something that requires a lot less time. So that's a little bit about the chicken breeding operation, the struggles of the chicken breeding operation. Of course, like right now, the weather's gorgeous. Beautiful time for us to be shipping hatching eggs all over the country because we are MPIP certified. But this is also the time of year when all of our chickens decide to start molting and we don't have eggs to ship out all over the country and we don't have eggs to put in the incubator. Y'all, I'll tell you what, the struggle is always real. If it's not one thing, it's another, but we are gonna get this up and running. So let me introduce you to the guys and girls that are gonna make this happen for us. So like I said earlier, these are the buffs. And as you can see, the buff English Orpington is much different than the buff American Orpington. They're a much larger bodied bird. They have a lot looser feather pattern. Very, very pretty birds. And here's our silver-laced English Orpingtons. He's a really, really pretty guy. There's a couple of girls in here that he was kind of wearing out, so we just made sure we got him 3 new girls. He's up to 5 girls now. We're hoping to add a number 6 soon. With these silver-laced English Orpingtons, it's important that you don't put too many girls with a guy because he just can't breed them all. These are actually considered a rare breed, and the biggest reason that they're a rare breed is because they have such a big skirt that breeding becomes pretty difficult for them. So our fertility rates are a little bit lower on these guys anyhow. And if you add too many hens in here, then you really just start to see your fertility rates plummet. So this is the silver-laced English Orpingtons. Here's the lemon cuckoo English Orpingtons, and I'll tell you what, this guy right here, he's a little bit of a feisty guy, so I'm kind of keeping my distance just because I don't want him hitting the camera. But he is a fertile myrtle. I will tell you what, our fertility rates on these lemon cuckoos are no trouble at all. We're working really hard at trying to develop a little bit more barring in the females. The males, you have no problem with the barring at all. He's a very beautiful example of a double-barred male. Great looking comb. The dark tail feathers are a Colombian gene that is brought in. These have a little mix of Creole in them is how you get some of the barring. So really, really cool bird, really pretty. And that brings us to the diamond jubilees here. We're definitely working on this program as well. He's a great looking rooster. He's exactly what we want. We want the darker mahogany color with the almost black neck. And these are actually really green feathers if you take a look at them on him. So kind of a very, very dark green to almost black on the neck. Nice dark green tail feathers. Good dashes of white here and there. Nice mahogany color on the body. Now on the girls, what we're working for is kind of like this girl right here in the front. We want the dark mahogany on the neck with more of the chestnut color in the body with all the little spangled splashings in there. Different people have different thought patterns on what they're going for in their jubilees. She's a really good example of what we're hoping to get in our program. Right now I'm kind of walking over here to the dude coops. So we have 2 chicken coops that we keep over here that we call the dude coops, and it's where we keep all of our roosters. They are kind of permanent housing situations, so it's 2 more of the big chicken coops with the individual chicken runs. The reason we have 2 dude coops is because we have one for the older birds, and then we also have one for more juvenile roosters. So one of the things that is relatively common knowledge, but we've definitely noticed it in our program, is that if boys don't have girls to fight over, they tend to not fight. And if we end up with a rooster that is being a big butthead and is still really picking on other roosters and always wanting to fight, well, he either gets sold off or he gets culled. Because one of the things that we're really trying hard to breed for in our program is temperament. So I want great big bodied, super sweet roosters. So in this coop over here, I have my backup rooster for my buff Orpingtons. And then the rest of them, 3 lemon cuckoos and 2 silver laced. They are older roosters that we're keeping an eye on to see if they're going to be big, pretty roosters and big, nice roosters. So far, so good. And this pen over here is the juvenile roosters. So we have several different breeds in here. Now, the majority of these chickens that are in here are chickens that have been pulled for sale. So we're working deals with people, or they're already sold, so they've had to be pulled out of the grow out flocks to spend some time in here. So they're just easier to catch and more readily available. But these little girls right here are another part of my wife's program. So we're gonna be getting these guys out of this cage ASAP and getting them out with some other breeds that we have combined in chicken tractors. So these are my wife's English lavender Orpingtons. Beautiful, beautiful chickens. They're looking really, really pretty, growing out very, very well. Today's their first day in this cage, and I'm hoping to get them out in the next day or 2. So they're kind of like, what the heck, what is this cage thing right now? But again, English lavender Orpingtons, just like the buffs, a larger body than your American lavender Orpington, a looser feather pattern. I would say these birds are about 12 weeks old, so they're still itty bitties. They're still real young, but we've got the rooster, we've got the 2 hens, so we're gonna be able to start building a program off of this, just like we did with our silver laced. It's just gonna take longer because of the fact that he doesn't have as many girls to have eggs for him. That's going to bring us to our last breeding pen here, which this breeding pen is a little funny because right now it has multiple different breeds in it. But it's because all these birds are very young. They're not breeding yet. They're small, so we can keep them together. Eventually, these are going to be in different pens. You can see that I've got one buff hiding right there. She's just not quite big enough to go in with our rooster and our 2 other hens. So she's in here just as a temporary roommate until she can get in with her own breeding flock that you met earlier. Down here in front of us, these are chocolate English Orpingtons. All we have right now is these 2 hens, but we currently have more eggs in the incubator. So these are some very, very young girls. I think these are like 9 weeks or so. And then obviously the ones that we're hatching right now are going to be behind them, but it's another color pattern that we wanted to go with. These are chocolate English Orpington. That guy right there, actually those 2, these are called Creole English Orpingtons. And they're super duper pretty. We like them a whole lot. The color pattern is beautiful as they get older. And there is some variation in the color pattern, but we'll try and breed them to where we get them to where they're fairly consistent on the color that they produce. And for the last one, I'm gonna have to move my camera here, but this is kind of the coolest one. These ones right here that are kind of buff. There's one over there. So like that's one right there. And there's a rooster back there. But these ones right here, they're very, very unique. These are blue buff Colombian English Orpingtons. So the blue buff is reference to the fact that they have kind of this mottled color pattern of lavender and buff. So that's why they're blue buff. And then as you can see on the rooster, he's getting a lot of blue. He's getting a lot of blue coming in on his neck here. That's the Colombian color pattern. So Colombian refers to a color pattern, and then blue buff refers to the color. So you can see how pretty he is. It's like under the wing, there's a lot of blue. He's very, very beautiful color of buff, and then the Colombian color pattern with the blue neck coming in. Now, part of what we like about where we live is that, you know, like Austin and the suburbs of Austin, a lot of them are allowed to have chickens. And because they're, you know, city folk who are allowed to have chickens, they like a lot of the prettier chickens. So We breed these large-bodied Orpingtons because they're very beautiful. They're easy to sell for a decent amount of money to the suburb crowd. They are good egg layers, so a lot of people like them. People who like chickens like Orpingtons, they're friendly. And then on top of that, they're a big-bodied bird, which means that when we have cull birds, we have a nice big bird that we can put in our freezer. So it's multi-purpose. There's no one-trick ponies here on Rockin Farm. But I think as we sign off, we'll leave you with the birds here. That kind of explains to you a little bit about what some of our goals are. It explains a little bit about how we're trying to do a few different things. And I've introduced you to the majority of the breeds that we're trying to work on. The only thing I didn't show you we're trying to work on is the blacks and the whites, and that's because right now our program is kind of at a standstill on those, but we're going to work on blacks and whites as well. So I hope you enjoyed the birds. I hope you enjoyed the tour. This has been Chris with Rockin Farm. Till I see y'all again, please be happy and live healthy.